Okay, write down the gradient of a straight line that is perpendicular to a line of gradient 2. So we've got to remember what the word perpendicular means. So in the case of A here, I've got a line that's of gradient 2. So if it's gradient 2, it's relatively steep-ish, yeah? So it probably looks something like that with a gradient of 2. Okay. Now, if a line is perpendicular to this, remember perpendicular just means it's at a right angle to it, yeah? So in other words, the line that we're interested in will be at right angles to this, okay? So if I sort of sketch it, draw it there, it could be a line like that there, okay? Whereby this then is 90 degrees, okay? Right angle. Now what we do is, right, because here we're going to have two different gradients, aren't we? Okay, we've got this line of gradient 2, and then we've got this line, and we don't know what the gradient is. Okay, but because I've got two different gradients, I'm going to call this my first gradient. So I'm going to call this my like M1. Okay, my first gradient M1, and that's equal to 2 because they tell us. And then the line that's perpendicular to it, I'm going to call M2. Okay, now I don't know what that gradient is, so I'll put sort of a question mark there. Okay. In order to work out M2, what we do is we use this little formula, right? There's a little formula that will always work. Okay, you just need to remember it. Quite simply, if you times the two gradients together, so M1 times M2, okay? So I'm going to put a dot for times, right? You can write times if you want. I'm going to put a dot there. So it times the two gradients together. If they are perpendicular, the result will always equal -1, okay? Every time. So you just got to remember this result. Okay? So times the two gradients together, if it equals -1, they are perpendicular and they right angles to each other. So I can now use this result and work backwards to work out what my M2 is. So you know, because I know my gradient for M1, the first line here is 2, I can put 2 in there. And the second gradient, I don't know what it is, so I can leave it written as M2. And I've got a little bit of algebra there. Now think, because here I've got 2 times M2, I can work out M2 by taking that 2 over the other side, yeah? Of course, think when I take it over the other side, because I'm timesing here, when I take it over, I've got to divide. So I get that there. So the gradient for this line would be -1/2, okay? Simple as that. So with B now, exactly the same thing again. You use the same result. It always works. So the two gradients have to times to give -1. So the line I've got given here, it's got gradient 3. So I'll call that my like M1 if you like. M2 I want to work out. So put it into the formula. And because I'm timesing, right, well, take it over and divide. And I get -1/3. Okay? So same here then for the next one. I'm going to call this my M1. So use this, write down the result again. So I got -2 here times M2, which is -1. Okay, so now this time I got -2, but you're still timesing by M2, so you still take it over the other side, and because I'm timesing, when you take it over, you divide. But now, because I'm dividing by -2, I've got negative divided by a negative. Of course, negative and negative becomes a positive, yeah? So my M2 in this case becomes +1/2. Okay. That's the gradient there. D then, so my gradient this time is 1/2, so that's my M1. So again, write down the result. So I've got 1/2 times M2, which is -1, yeah? Now again, because I'm timesing, you're going to take this half over the other side and divide. -1, divide by 1/2. Okay, now you can type that into your calculator if you want, okay? You just have to sort of structure your fractions properly on there. The other way of doing it, of course, is when you divide by a fraction, whenever you divide by a fraction, the bottom number on that fraction flips to the top, right? So you get, because there's 2 on the bottom there, flips to the top, so you get negative there and the 2 on top, so you get your gradient to be -2. Check on your calculator, it works. And then you've got this one then, M1 times M2, which is -1, okay? While 3/2 here for M1 times M2 is -1, okay? So again, because I'm timesing here, take that 3/2 over and divide. And when you, as I said before, when you're dividing by a fraction, that bottom number can flip to the top. So you end up with minus in front, the 2 goes to the top, and you're left with 3 on the bottom. So the gradient, which is perpendicular, is -2/3.